Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
Allah says, consider the fig and the olive. Now often when Allah wants human beings to consider themselves, then Allah would always use natural phenomena first for us to consider before we consider ourselves. So here Allah says, consider the fig and the olive. So examine it, open it, see what's in it. And consider Mount Sinai that is so tall. And then consider Makkah, the land of safety or the place of safety, that is actually a valley. Surely we created man of the best stature, so high, and then we placed him to be the lowest of the low. So Allah says that Allah has created these contrasting things, but man has the decision. Mount Sinai doesn't have the decision to be flat tomorrow. Neither does Makkah have the decision to, or the intention to raise itself. But man is the only creation of Allah that has the choice whether he wants to be in that stature or whether he wants to be a base to the lowest of the low. And then Allah says, so who can deceive you about the judgment, about this judgment of who has been elevating himself? Is Allah not the most conclusive of all judges? So what we want to talk today about is surrendering. It's the meaning of Islam, is to surrender. Islam always wants us to leave those things which does not concern us, to leave those things which does not grow us. But specifically today we want to talk about surrendering of the ego. Islam means to submit or to surrender to that which is natural and authentic. Surrender is to give oneself up to the original cause of one's being. So to the original state of how you were created. Like when you were a baby, you had no influences. You came into this world in an original state. Surrender can only take effect when one knows what is the meaning of surrender. One of the things we are called upon in Islam to surrender is the ego. Self-surrender is the same as self-knowledge. So one can't surrender yourself if you don't know who the self is, or surrender the ego. And when is the ego different from the self, and who is the self? So if you know who you are, or if you don't know who you are, or what you should be being, you won't know which part of you is it that you have to surrender. And the best way to engage with yourself in order to find yourself is through being authentic and leaving that which you know does not benefit your soul. Self-surrender comes with inquiry. We always use the phrase, stay within the question. So often you have to question these things that Allah wants us to consider in nature. Question these things about ourselves, our own duality. Question our intentions. Question our consciousness. Let us not be deluded by thinking that Allah is an image outside of ourselves. Allah says, نَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْكُمْ مِنْ حَبْلٍ وَرِيدٍ, that we are closer to you than your own jugular vein. So when we make dua, Allah is not something that's out there. We're making dua inwardly because we will find Allah is closer to us. And the day we finally discover Allah with us, then we will become aware that Allah was always there. We were just not listening. So once you seek the source, you merge with the source. You and the source are one. The mind is also not you. It is only the instrument that you use to create thoughts. And sometimes those thoughts are the perplexities we create that keeps us from life or seeing life as a contradiction. Ponder over what is sitting behind the mind. Who is sitting behind the mind? And the self will be found. You are not your mind. For example, if I ask you the question, who are you? You might not know who you are. Sometimes we don't have a complete picture of who we are. And when I ask you the question, where are you? You might say, I'm here. Then I say, where is here? Now close your eyes and find yourself, where are you? Then you might say, I'm here. I feel it here. And then I say, close your eyes and see if you're still there. And do you feel me still here? Do you feel everybody else in the room? Do you feel the things around you? Then you'll say yes. Then where were you really? Were you inside of you, or were you everything that was around you? So once you come to discover this, you come to discover that you're not really something, that we all are just nothing. And it is the ego that makes us something. When we came into this world, we were nothing. It was the social influences that makes us something. For example, when you're a baby and everybody the first time come to see the baby and they say, oh Masha, he's so cute, look at his dimples, and he's going to be a clever boy, and he's going to be a tall boy. So they're already starting to put identities on you. And so when you grow a little bit older and you can eat your own food, and they say, mommy's good boy, boy's eating the food, and there's another identity. And when you grow older as a teenager, and then your parents says to you, you need to dress up nicely, and you need to do better than the neighbor's children, because we have to not show the neighbors that we can't afford it. Another identity. You mix with society, multiple identities. Media trying to portray you as a certain identity. So all these layers of identity is packed upon you, that it creates an impression of who you are. So when we need to find ourselves, we need to peel away those layers and find out who is me. Attention also, that we often seek as human beings, it's a human weakness, is food for the ego. For example, now let's bring it home to the gay world. For example, we go to a party and then we dress ourselves up. Not functionally. Nobody dress functionally to go to a party. You dress up because you want to look nice. Some of us dress up because we want to stand out in the party. So instead we dress up to be noticed. And this attention that we get feeds the ego. We are allowing others to reflect to us what we would like to see. And it's all superficial. It's all on the outside. So ego is a social thing. It comes from outside and it makes you. If we did not have our society, our friends, our circles, or our hangout spots where we go for our ego to be fed, there would have been no ego to worry about. So society feeds our ego. The media is a huge instrument in the feeding of this ego. And the media encourages us to hanker after things that is not permanent. What is not permanent is not worth striving for. So the identity that is being formed by the reflection that we get from our societies or from our hangout spots, it's not you sitting there, it's your ego. It's a false identity. One of the interesting things that I've noticed, just the transition of, for example, a person that is coming out of the closet, is just discovering his sexuality. And there's this retention, and there's this not knowing what is my identity. And then you compare that person to the person that's completely out of the closet. And you see the contrast between these people, these two people's lives. For example, if you look at the stereotypically gay boy, Before he's out of the closet, then there's no flapping. And suddenly he's out of the closet, then he's picked up an identity, and the hands go, and the clothes are starting to change. So he's picking up an identity which he thinks he is based on his community or his society. I remember once when I was in New York, so this was just the time when Jihad for Love came out, and I was just finished with talking about Jihad for Love, and this person from the media asked me to come if he can have an interview with me, but he'd like to interview me in the gay club. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure how you can interview me in the gay club because there's such a lot of music and noise in the gay club. But anyway, I went with, and I stood outside the club, and and he was also there, and he was waiting for his cameraman, so he's standing outside the club. And I could see inside the club, now the club's got these windows that are sort of tinted, so you can't fully see what's going on inside. And you can't also hear the music because you're standing on the outside. But you just see all these figures going up and down and going crazy. Like, if you look at it, you think, what's happening inside there? And suddenly when we went in, when the door opened, and there's just this loud noise. It's like, you're a completely different world when you step in there. And people are happy-go-lucky, and some people are more than happy-go-lucky. God knows what they've taken. And this one particular person come up to me and he says, oh, it's so nice to have the Imam in the club, and we're so proud of you, and you're so brave, and and you're doing it for all of us so we can be happy and gay. I wonder what my purpose is. Is this my purpose? To help people to be in an identity which does not really, which is a false identity. Because when you're gay, or when you discover your sexuality is not that of heterosexuality, it's only part of who you are. It's not who you are. It's an identity that society wants to put onto you that helps you to forget your real identity. So I say that we are made in the image of God, but we are reshaped in the image of society. We come into this world as pure souls, then we take on the reflections of society as we mature and develop society's identity of us. The soul is now covered with so many identities that we start losing focus of the true identity of the soul. We often recite Surah Asr when we finish our programs, by the token of time through the ages. So one of the ages is you're born, you become a toddler, then a teenager, then an adolescent, then an adult, and then you grow old and you die. So these are your ages. And so through the ages, man is in a state of loss. So why Allah says this? Because as you develop in those stages, you pick up identities and you become something. Except those who have faith and who do righteous deeds, that keeps themselves from being lost and living and constantly trying to live with the truth and not the false reflection of what is true. So as you grow through these ages, there are trials and tribulations, but they persevere through those tribulations. So those are the ones who are successful. Now I want you to see hell here, because it's very interesting that Allah says, فَيَجْعَلُهُ فِي جَهَنَّمْ. It doesn't mean that Allah is physically placing them in Jahannam, but Allah is putting him in such a place that is Jahannam. So what does that mean? Is that if you're constantly following the identities of society that society is creating, you're bound to fall into depression, you're bound to fall into a place where you have low self-esteem, you have lack of confidence, you don't know what is your identity. You're bound to be depressed. And depression is almost something that you can experience in Jahannam. It's not something that we want to experience. It's not a nice place to be. And so you're lost. بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن الكريم ونفعنا إياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم إنه جواد ملك بر رب رؤوف رحيم. So how do we develop our true identity without the ego? And when does this happen? It happens only when you realize that the identity that you are carrying is not your own. You can defend it, or you can peel away of the layers of the identity to come to your true identity. If you are still suffering anxiety or depression or loneliness or low self-esteem, then you must know that your identity is still not your own. Because if you live within your true identity, it's a happy state, it's a content state, it's a pure state. Because where your true identity lies, it is where you'll find your Creator. And your Creator is all good. True identity is peaceful. True identity is loving. True identity is content. As the Quran says, Nafsul Mutma'in. The nafs, the soul is content. There's no worries, there's no fear. Allah says that there are three different types in fact there are many more, but there are three that are mentioned in the Quran, three different types of souls. One is the Nafsul Ammara. And the Nafsul Ammara is the soul that is inclined towards false pleasure and indulgence. You know, they just want pleasure, they want pleasure all the time. That is called the Nafsul Ammara. It is the soul that often complains. It is the soul that's never satisfied. It is the soul that's never constant and always blames others for its condition. It is the soul that's neither here or there. You can see those souls. There's a lot of those souls around. One minute they're on the musalla, the next minute they're somewhere else, and then they come back to the musalla, and then they ma'ata, and then they ma'ata, and that's the nafsul lawwama. So the nafsul mutma'inna is the soul that is completely at ease with itself, completely relaxed and satisfied with itself. A soul that was uninfluenced by the identities this world was trying to shape him with. So we ask Allah to grant us victory over our lower selves, to open our eyes to the influences of our environments, and to help us to reach a soul state of complete satisfaction and peace. Inshallah.